The morning sun spilled across the marble floors of my mansion, glinting off the crystal chandelier that hung above the foyer. I smoothed the silk blouse I was wearing, feeling its soft warmth against my skin, and took a deep breath, savoring the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Everything in this house, the art, the furniture, the polished oak of the staircase, was mine. Every piece, every detail, reminder that I had built this life from scratch. And yet, despite the calm, my phone buzzed insistently on the marble countertop. I picked it up, expecting a work call, but the message on the screen made my chest tighten. "We're coming over. See you soon." My family. After 15 years of excluding me from birthdays, holidays, and reunions, they had the nerve to show up unannounced at my mansion. My first instinct was disbelief, then irritation. Then a small, ironic smile curved across my lips. 15 years. And now they think they can just walk in. I could almost hear the imagined whispers in my mind. She'll still be the same little girl. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The woman who answered the door now had secrets of her own. Wealth, success, and power they had never seen coming. I walked toward the grand double doors, heart steady but pulse quickened, savoring the anticipation. They had expected weakness, a pleading niece, a struggling young woman. What they would see instead. I remember the sting of that day like it was yesterday, though I was only 16. The smell of fresh grass from the backyard mingled with the faint scent of my mother's perfume, and laughter floated from the living room where my cousins gathered. I had knocked lightly on the door, just hoping someone would notice me. "Isabella, maybe next time." My aunt's voice was sharp, almost rehearsed, as she waved me away. Next time. There was no invitation, no small gesture, just the cold certainty that I was not welcome. My chest tightened, and I could feel the lump in my throat. My hands shook, not just from anger, but from a deep, unfamiliar sorrow. I had always been the quiet one, the girl who loved reading by the window and doodling in her journal. And yet, even my passions weren't enough to bridge the gap they had built around me. I slumped onto the back porch steps, my school books pressing against my lap, and opened the little locket my grandmother had given me on my 12th birthday. Inside was a tiny photograph of her, smiling with warmth and encouragement. "Never let anyone dim your light, Isabella. You are meant for more than waiting for permission." Her words wrapped around me like a protective shawl, grounding me when the world felt unkind. That evening, while the sounds of my family's laughter faded into the night, I made a silent promise. I would not be defined by their exclusion. I would not wait for their approval or their acceptance. I would forge a life that was mine alone, a life where I could wake up every morning knowing my worth. The hurt was raw, but it became fuel. Each rejection became a reminder. If they would not see me, I would make them wish they had. Not through vengeance, but through the undeniable proof of my strength. From that moment on, I began to plot my escape, not a literal one, but a journey toward independence, toward a world where I could succeed on my own terms, where no one could hold me back. The seeds were planted that night, nurtured by quiet determination and the memory of my grandmother's locket, a symbol of the life I was determined to claim. I threw myself into the world beyond my family's judgment, starting with the small things. Internships, part-time jobs, and nights spent learning everything I could about business, finance, and marketing. Every rejection letter, every door slammed in my face, reminded me of the sting I had felt that night on the back porch. But unlike before, the hurt now fueled me instead of breaking me. I met people along the way who saw potential where my family hadn't. There was Mr. Langley, a seasoned entrepreneur who ran a small consulting firm. He noticed my drive during a networking event and, after a long conversation over coffee, offered me my first real opportunity, a junior analyst position. It wasn't glamorous and the pay was modest, but for the first time, I felt the thrill of possibility. The early days were grueling. I worked late nights, my fingers stiff from typing reports, my eyes burning from spreadsheets that never seemed to end. I stumbled, made mistakes, and faced skepticism from colleagues who assumed I didn't belong. Yet with each challenge, I learned how to negotiate, how to pitch, how to turn criticism into growth. Each small victory, no matter how modest, became a stepping stone toward a life I controlled. There were moments of doubt, of course. The loneliness was acute. Sometimes I caught myself imagining the family I had been denied, feeling the ache of their absence. But I kept the memory of my grandmother's locket close, a quiet reminder that my worth was never conditional on their approval. One by one, the pieces began to fall into place. My first major client was a turning point, a deal I had secured through sheer persistence and careful planning. I watched as our modest profits grew, slowly but surely. I learned to invest wisely, to trust my instincts, to navigate the fine line between patience and ambition. By my mid-20s, I had founded a boutique consultancy firm that specialized in helping startups thrive. The irony was not lost on me. I had built what my family had never thought I could, in a world that had initially turned its back on me. I kept most of my success hidden. Social media glimpses were modest, showing only generic office photos or city views. Family updates? Non-existent. I didn't need their validation. I was building a life for myself, not for them. And yet, deep down, I knew that one day they might come knocking. Not because they had suddenly realized my worth, but because they sensed change, power, independence, the things they had once refused to see in me. When that day came, I would be ready, standing not as the girl who had been left out, but as the woman who had risen far above their expectations. The knock on the grand double doors echoed through the marble halls, a sound that made my pulse quicken despite my composed exterior. I smoothed my tailored blazer, took a slow breath, and walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking lightly against the polished floor. When I opened the door, there they were, my mother, my father, and my older brother, faces a mix of hesitation, curiosity, and that old, familiar superiority. For a moment, they looked past me, as if expecting the same insecure girl they had dismissed for 15 years. The moment stretched, and I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Hello," I said, voice calm, even melodic, as if the world around us had slowed down. "I wasn't expecting you." They shuffled awkwardly onto the marble foyer, taking in the enormous crystal chandelier, the abstract paintings lining the walls, the sculpture in the center of the room that caught the light like fire. Every detail whispered success, sophistication, and independence. "Isabella," my mother began, voice faltering. We just wanted to." I held up a hand, silencing her with ease. "I know why you're here. You want to see me." My eyes flicked over them, reading the emotions that had once eluded me: guilt, envy, disbelief. They were unsure how to process the transformation before them. I guided them into the living room, letting them absorb the view of the skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, the tasteful furniture, and the trophies lining the shelves: awards for business innovation, philanthropy recognition, leadership honors. I sat gracefully on the cream-colored sofa, legs crossed, hands resting lightly in my lap, and gestured to the city beyond the windows. "I built this," I said simply. "From the ground up. Every client, every contract, every late night, you didn't see any of it because you weren't interested in seeing me. But here it is, tangible proof that I don't need your validation. I don't need your permission to exist, to succeed, to thrive." The silence was heavy. My father's jaw tightened. My brother looked like he might speak, but couldn't find the words. My mother's eyes welled slightly, though I wasn't sure if it was pride, regret, or shock. "I own the company that pays my employees, that funds charities, that invests in startups," I continued, my voice steady, carrying the weight of years of effort and resilience. "This mansion is mine. Every piece of it is mine. And I am not the girl you left behind at family reunions. I am the woman you tried to ignore, and now you see me fully." Their expressions changed in real time: awe, disbelief, shame, and, in some corners, admiration. It was intoxicating, in a quiet, measured way, not revenge, not gloating, but the undeniable satisfaction of truth laid bare. Finally, my brother's voice cracked. "We didn't know." I shook my head softly, smiling. "Of course you didn't. You never tried. But now you do. And the question is, What will you do with what you see? For the first time in 15 years, I had the power. The table had turned, not through anger, not through vindictiveness, but through the certainty of my own accomplishment, the quiet roar of a life claimed and shaped entirely by me. I leaned back against the cream sofa, fingers lightly tapping the armrest, letting the silence settle like a weight around us. For 15 years, they had assumed they held all the power. Now, for the first time, it was clear who had the upper hand. And I wasn't about to give it away lightly. I'll be honest, I began, my voice calm but firm. Seeing you here is surprising. And I'll admit, it stirs up memories I've worked hard to move past. But I also believe in growth, if you're willing to meet me halfway. My mother's lips trembled. Isabella, we want a relationship. We were wrong. I let her words hang in the air, and then, slowly, I outlined my conditions. They were simple but non-negotiable, rooted not in revenge, but in accountability and self-growth. First, my father needed to respect boundaries. No more dismissive remarks, no belittling comments. Actions mattered more than empty apologies. Second, my brother had to prove he was willing to work on his life independently. No more relying on family safety nets or assuming my generosity would cover his mistakes. Third, my mother needed to shed the toxic patterns she had unknowingly passed down: favoritism, passive aggression, and exclusion. She could love, but it had to be unconditional, without comparison or judgment. I watched as their expressions shifted from confusion to realization. The truth was heavy, and it landed differently on each of them. But I wasn't done. Finally, I said, letting a small smile creep onto my face, I will consider reconnecting fully, but only if these conditions are met. This isn't punishment, it's opportunity. Opportunity for healing, growth, and authentic connection. I'm not the girl who waited for you to notice me. I am the woman who knows her worth, and I will not compromise it again. There was a pause, long and deliberate, as they absorbed my words. I could feel the weight of years shifting, the old family dynamics fracturing under the undeniable force of my presence. Then, almost imperceptibly, their posture changed. Shoulders softened, eyes met mine without avoidance. I could see it. Hope, hesitancy, and the first glimmers of genuine remorse. For the first time, I sensed that change was possible. Not because I demanded it with anger, but because I offered it with clarity, firmness, and an unshakable sense of self. This was the power shift. I had turned the tables without bitterness, I had set the terms, and I had reclaimed the narrative of my life. The road ahead would not be easy, but for the first time, all of us could move forward on equal footing. Weeks passed after that day, and slowly, I began to notice changes. My mother called not with demands or complaints, but with curiosity about my work, genuinely wanting to understand who I had become. My father started listening instead of instructing, and my brother, for the first time, showed initiative in his own life, finding a job, taking responsibility, and learning what it meant to contribute rather than depend. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But there were glimmers of sincerity, moments where laughter wasn't forced and apologies weren't empty. I watched these small shifts and felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that my boundaries had worked, not as walls of punishment, but as pillars guiding them toward growth. One evening, I sat by the large window in my office, the city lights stretching infinitely beyond the glass. The locket my grandmother had given me lay open on the desk, catching the soft glow of the lamp. I held it in my hand and traced her words one more time. Never let anyone dim your light. You are meant for more than waiting for permission. I realized then that the journey had never been about making them see me. It had been about seeing myself. The pain, the years of exclusion, had all sculpted me into someone resilient, powerful, and unapologetically independent. They had missed the chance to shape me, but I had shaped myself. And now, as they cautiously stepped into this new relationship with me, aware of my worth, aware of my expectations, I could feel a balance settling. Not perfect, but authentic. Not conditional, but honest. I smiled softly, feeling the warmth of accomplishment, of closure. The mansion, the accolades, the success, They were symbols, yes, but the real triumph was the woman I had become. Someone who could forgive without forgetting, who could love without compromising, who could face the past without fear. And as I looked out over the city's skyline, I whispered to myself, a final affirmation, a closing note for the voiceover of my life story. I am not the girl you ignored. I am the woman you should have never underestimated.